Lord of the Mysteries. Chapter 589. Sowing Discord. For an instant, Klein imagined that Tracy would directly attack him, as her face was already flushing red with anger. Her blue eyes had turned dark like the surface of a sea before an impending storm. But eventually, Tracy didn't act rashly. She looked towards Katerina Pell and awaited the decision of the Demoness of Unaging. She knew very well that, although Sequence 5 and Sequence 4 were just separated by one level, there was a qualitative difference between them. There was no way to bridge the gap with one's battle skills or execution. One was a normal human with special powers, while the other was already a demigod, a legendary creature possessing godhood. Furthermore, the two present were clearly not Sequence 4. Placed before them, Tracy felt like she was a low sequence beyond her. Katerina Pell didn't seem furious. She looked at Klein, who wore the face of Kalangos, and chuckled as her eyes moved across him. What an interesting lad. If not for Mr. Death Consul being here, I might have not revealed the upheavals within my heart and have an unexpected encounter with you which would lead into having a pure and romantic story with you. No, you don't want to. This sounds really terrifying. Klein didn't dare look at her as he continued looking at Tracy. Seeing no response from Isaac Eggers, Katerina retracted her gaze and said to Tracy with her melodious voice, "Embrace the afflicted pain. This might be something beneficial for you." She then looked towards Isaac. "I remember that batch of documents. It records the various attempts used by the Balam royalty to revive death, but unfortunately, they seem to fail miserably. Towards the end, they seem to consider creating an artificial death. Are you still interested? An artificial death? How can death be artificial? Apart from the uniqueness and beyond her characteristics, how can there be other methods? It's not like it's something you can find on the street. Was the former Balam Empire and the present numinous episcopate all crazy?" Klein mumbled silently and didn't interrupt the conversation between the demigods. Isaac pondered for 2 seconds before asking, "What price do I need to pay?" Katerina smiled youthfully. "No, there's no need. I thought it over. Helping you regain your memories and find your past in order to become the Death Consul from before should be a rather interesting matter. This can bring more changes and fun to this world." Those words sound like a rebellious teenage girl. A Demoness of Unaging not only doesn't age in body but in mind as well? Klein felt it somewhat impossible to grasp her thought process. Perhaps only a Sequence 6 or 5, or even Sequence 4 of the Spectator pathway can tell? He subconsciously guessed. Isaac nodded and extended his right hand. A piece of paper and a fountain pen in the room automatically flew over as though invisible spirits were at his service. After scribbling, he threw the paper over. "You can summon my messenger. So there's only one copper whistle. For it to remain effective for more than 1,000 years, that copper whistle is definitely no simple item." Klein instinctively wished to reach out to touch Isaac's copper whistle inside his pocket, but he held back. Katerina caught the piece of paper and scanned it before pursing her lips into a smile. "I thought you would have directly told me where in the underworld." She looked up as her blue eyes effused an indescribable warmth as she smiled faintly. "I still remember how Mr. Death Consul from before was such a powerful but cold man. He left a deep impression on me. I'm also curious as to why you would become so soft." Isaac held his fist to his mouth and shook his head with a bitter smile. "I'm immortal, but that doesn't mean I don't age. Once a person ages, they will often become placid." "No." Katerina's eyes flickered deep down as she said without concealing anything, "I look forward to the day you recover all your memories. I wish to see how you would evaluate the present you." Upon saying that, she curled her lips slightly and winked at Klein. "Perhaps we will release an existence more evil than a devil. This is her trying to sow discord, right?" Klein muttered inwardly, but he couldn't help but recall the pale disaster recorded in many historical books and church tomes. It had caused a large number of casualties and had turned the northern continent into a living hell. And this disaster was mainly led by Death and the primordial Demoness, with Death's entourage and the Demoness sect from the southern continent. In this entire matter, Mr. Azek, who was known as Death Consul, definitely played a rather important role. Azek fell silent for a few seconds as he grabbed Klein's shoulder and pulled him into the spirit world and traversed it. Instantly, there was only Demoness of unaging Katerina Pell and Vice Admiral Ailment Tracy left in the Black Death's captain's cabin. The latter looked at the spot where the two had disappeared, and after taking a while to calm herself, she clenched her teeth and said, "I'll never forget this matter." Katerina resumed her pure demeanor and smiled faintly. "Feel the afflicted pain. The more pain you feel, the more you will realize how weak you are. When the pain reaches a threshold, the desire to change yourself will reach a certain intensity, allowing you to withstand the potion and obtain godhood during the ritual to become a demigod." When Tracy heard this, she suddenly thought of something. Her expression froze as she blurted out, "Helene was able to escape the Black Death because of—" Katerina smiled mildly. "You are my youngest child, but you are the one who's most promising at becoming a demigod. As a mother, I will naturally want to help you." Tracy's facial muscles twitched as she said with a warped expression, "That's right. I have a mother like you and a mom. Why didn't you tell me the truth in the beginning? You clearly knew the mid and low sequences of several other pathways." Katerina turned her body as her white gown fluttered. She said ethereally, "We all need to approach the primordial. We are all her children." As she spoke, surging but silent black flames soared over the huge sailboat, which was dozens of meters long. The flames covered every corner as they burned silently without injuring any of the pirates on the Black Death, as though they were clearing up any accumulated dust. The stacked colors quickly receded, and the indescribable transparent figure went far into the distance. Klein's spirituality suddenly stirred as he felt that the items he had left on the Black Death had all vanished. As expected of a Demoness of unaging. Klein sighed. Just as he was about to say something, he felt himself plummet. He had left the spirit world with Azek. He found themselves in a mountain valley with a river flowing. There were fertile fields with a manor and town that was built in a Loanese style. Klein looked around him and discovered that he was standing in a dark cemetery that had long been abandoned. "Mr. Azek!" he shouted in puzzlement. Azek walked to a grave with a broken tombstone that was covered in weeds. He said solemnly, "After meeting Katerina Pell, I recalled some matters again. I once told you that in a particular dream, in one of my lives, I had a daughter. She had soft black hair and enjoyed sitting in a swing I made myself while requesting sweets from me. When traversing the spirit world, I suddenly sensed a call of my bloodline." Klein was infected with his emotions as he asked solemnly, "Is this her?" Azek nodded and crouched down. He touched the halved tombstone as his bronze face wore a gentle, sorrowful, and confused look. "This is her grave. If I recall correctly, she's been dead for 926 years. 926 years. Klein wanted to say something, but he was stopped by that extended period of time. If it wasn't for the churches compelling people to be buried in cemeteries and providing a certain degree of surveillance, it would have been hard to find this grave and tombstone, since there hadn't been any all-out wars since the Fifth Epoch. A human's life was on the order of decades, but this was 926 years. After a long moment of silence in the cemetery, Azek got up again and grabbed Klein's shoulder. "I'll send you back first." After a few minutes of traversing the spirit world, Klein saw the white bedsheets and yellowish-brown floorboards. Azek pressed down on his hat and said in a deep voice, "I'll continue my journey while you continue on your adventures." Klein nodded. Just as he was about to say something, he saw Mr. Azek curl his lips and smile. "Were you afraid that I would become an evil person like a Demoness after fully recovering my memories?" Before Klein could reply, Azek sighed. "I'm also very worried. But I have a greater desire for discovering myself." After saying that, the surrounding aqueous void around him rippled as he vanished from the room. For a long period of time, Klein stood in his spot, silent. He shook his head and laughed silently as he consoled himself, "Perhaps when the time comes, I'll already be a powerhouse at the level of Angel. I can establish a treatment facility that treats antisocial personalities and have Miss Justice be the head doctor. Retracting his thoughts, Klein sat down and habitually reflected over his operation. I originally thought that I could graze a demoness of affliction and obtain Death's Chronicles while making further progress in the human disappearances. Who knew that the development and outcome were completely out of my expectations? I only managed to complete the initial goals. Sigh, I cannot incite Mr. Azek to take action since he hasn't completely recovered. Furthermore, the person we were facing was a demoness of unaging. What's most important is to be strong myself. Relying on myself is better than asking for help from others. On careful consideration, I do rely on myself most of the time. I can attack the human disappearance cases from the angle of the buyer, that crazy Captain Connors Victor. Klein changed his sitting posture and nodded to himself as he murmured inwardly, "The greatest gain that I received was to establish the preliminary acting principles of a faceless. It's to get into character and be detached, overcome any aversions, and to be careful about being too immersed in the role. This way, by relying only on simple, ordinary, real acting, perhaps it will take a year or two to digest the potion. But for me, I should be able to fully digest it in about 4 to 6 months." After reflecting on the matter, Klein prepared to sleep. He planned on taking down the radio transceiver from above the gray fog once it was daybreak, so as to establish communications with the magic mirror, Rhodes. Of course, he had to first divine the level of danger above the gray fog.